Welcome, adventurers! I'm
Hello.
Goose,
I'm Turnip.
and we're doing a little 3D modeling. So this is for
Well,
the
you're
game I'm
doing
working
3D
on.
modeling.
Well, you're doing art. You're helping. We're gonna do a little bit of 3D modeling, and I'm making game assets for the game. I've already made one full, complete game asset, so I know a little bit of the system now. And I'm just gonna go through and show you guys the process of how I do it, at least. And hopefully, you guys will learn something, and the people who know more than me will teach me something.
You look good?
Yeah. So this is a little shelf I put together. It's very basic because every shape you see, all the panels and boards, they're all just resized or rescaled basic shapes. These are all cubes and cylinders. If you don't know how to do that, it's really easy. It takes like 5 seconds to learn. Uh, you just, well, first off here, we'll start here. First, Shift A opens up your add menu, or you come up right here to add. You can add a basic mesh, a plane, cube, circle, sphere. Most commonly, you start with a cube, a cylinder, or a sphere because those are really basic shapes. And to get a baseline for whatever you're making started, you usually take your shape and scale it. So say I want this to be a tall beam. You scale it along the Z, which is just S and then Z, or S and then X, and then you can scale it along the X and make a wall, and then S and then Y, and then you just have another cube or a rectangle, or a rectangular prism. But yeah, that's the really basic gist of it, and you can do that with a lot of shapes just to get started. But that is only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this kind of 3D modeling. And something I noticed about these boards that I wanted on the front of this, ignore that they're all one item, I just did that because meh. But something I noticed is when you would be making a system like this with these beams that you want to be able to take out and move around, you would actually want notches in these boards, and that's perfect for a little tutorial about how to make those notches and how to use different 3D modeling techniques to get that effect. So, but today I'm just going to be going over basics of shape editing, a couple of things that are very easy and obvious and probably you already know, but this is for very beginning stuff. So, say you've extruded some shapes, you get some sort of object you like a shelf full of these bars for stuff, but you want to add little curved notches to the boards so that these bars could, in theory, slide into there and then slot right in, and you can take them out to change them later. So, how I would start this, I'm just jumping around everything. How I would start this is right around where you know you want the notch. I'd put a loop cut. So get your angles, get your positioning, and put loop cuts around where you want that notch. Oh god. Where'd the loop cut go? It went nowhere. Great. You know what? Just to clean this up a little bit. I'm not good at this. Don't think I'm good at this. I'm not. What we're going to do is actually duplicate the board so we have just one board to work with. And then we can duplicate that board and slide it down into those places when we want to replace them. So what we're going to do is take this board and put notches in it for these. The easiest way to get this measurement is to see where the lines are. So actually, another good trick, when you want to see something behind something else, use the hide. Select whatever you want and hit H, and it will disappear. And whenever you want it back, Alt H. But that will bring back everything you've hidden, so make sure you know what you're doing. So there we have our little measurements, and we can see on the grid system, this circle edge is in between these two notches right here. So given that we're working with wood and we want it to be accurate, so we want clearance for this, we would actually make the notch probably on this line so there is a gap between this post and our circle, so it's not a super tight fit. So we know we're putting the first loop cut right there at that line. And no, this is not the easiest or most efficient way to do this. This is how I do it because I'm not smart. And then right here you see another line. Now this is one of the smaller lines, so you got to keep track. It's 3 from that edge. So just keep that edge in mind, and when you come back up, you see it's 3 from that edge. So Control R. There we go. And then 1, 2, 3. Double check it, and you can always grab and move it, or hit G again when you're in grab mode, and it will slide it along those vertices. But this can be a little bit tricky depending on what kind of topology you have, so just be aware of that. But in simple boards like this, you can grab a whole ring and GG and slide it along any length, or just slide it around as needed. So now we have our width. Now we need the depth of the board, which is about halfway down. And just a little bit more like eyeball measuring, because it's not too crazy hard to do this. Just to double check. Hold on. Actually, just hide that. Actually, Alt-H. So we want the beams, or I want the beams, about center in the boards, which means I need to find out how far down from the center the bottom of this beam is. And that's a simple matter of where is the bottom of it and where is this bottom edge. So if we go out from here, we can see it's relatively in this block, and then you have 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks. So I'm gonna say about 4 from the bottom, and if that's not right where we need it, it's pretty easy to move it up. So we're gonna take this now, and actually we're gonna pull another trick. If you go into 2, it's edge select. So 1, 2, and 3 are, 1 is vertices, so you can select each point. 2 is edge select, so you select all the edges, and 3 is the faces. So that way, you need to keep this in mind, because there are certain functions that work really good depending on what mode of selection you're in, but you got to remember which one you're in. So I'm going to use edge select to select these edges, and then right click and subdivide, and it cuts them in half. And that gives me a nice little set of faces to do this with. And delete. And now we have open topology. We have a gap into the inside of our shape, which is not good, but it's also easy to fix. Select your faces, or select your vertices that you want to join together, hit F, and it creates a face in between those. This is really useful, but it can also mess up your topology if you don't know what points you're making faces in. So just keep track of your shit. GZ, and you can slide it down. And this is where it gets a little wonky, because I want to take this and do this. Control B and bevel it, so it adds a little slant. But you can see that's not doing what I want it to, and there's a reason for that. This is vertice mode, so it's using the vertice data. If we go into edge select and select that edge and Control B, it's doing the same thing. And that's going to be a pain no matter how you cut it. But there is an easier solution. It's not the best solution, but it's an easy one. And I'm going to use it. I'm going to subdivide again, so we have these now. And I'm going to take these 2 lines and subdivide. And if you click on the box, you can actually change the number of subdivides. So I'm going to switch it to 2. And now we have this. So what I want to do with this is take all these points, go back to my vertices, and now I can see those points on this. I want to take this and slide it down a little bit more. I want to take these points and slide them down a little bit more. And now we're going to say goodbye to, not that. Yeah, I know what we're going to do. Okay, so we're going to take these faces, these 2 faces, excuse me, select my faces, there. Those 4, those 2 on each side, and delete them, and they're gone. And now we're going to make faces with these points. Now this is going to do wonky stuff because you have the gap, but we're going to fix that, and we're going to fix it in a way that's going to keep our topology pretty dang clean, because messy topology does not work for game assets. You want faces of either 3 or 4 vertices, meaning like this face is a square. It has 4 vertices, there's no other vertices. In a game engine, most game engines run with either 3 or 4, so if it runs on 3, it's going to cut this in half and have a flat face with 2, or a flat face with 2 faces to it. But if you have an n-gon, which is anything above 4 vertices on the face, such as I don't think I have any examples on this. Yeah, this is all... Or actually, yeah, the top of these cylinders. These cylinders, the top of these cylinders are technically n-gons, so I'll have to clean that up later, but the easy solution is just a point in the middle that connects them all. When you have faces like that and you import them into game engines that like auto-solve that kind of stuff, it can make some very messy topology, so you have to take that into account. And there's a lot of examples. This is a very simple model, but on very complex models, you have to be real careful about your polygons. But, so you'd think we'd make a face here and that'd be it. But, actually, yes, that's a perfect solution. So we just select our points, do this, and we're good to go. And that keeps the faces clean. We have our shape we want. It's a neat little notch. Now, of course, if you're going higher poly or you want this to be a much smoother curve, there's a lot of ways you can do that. And one of the simplest solutions, of course, is back to the edge select and subdivide. Doing that and then just increasing the number and then curving it is a really easy way. But I'm happy with this. But now I have another problem. I have one notch out of 5. I need a lot of notches because I need this going down at least these first 3 shelf rungs. So what I'm going to do is get it into place to position it properly again. Nope. GZ. And yes, this is what could be considered like low poly game modeling. So you can actually see that this bar is going to clip through this bottom curve, so we just move it down. And now what we can actually do is align these points, these edges, or these flat faces that we've made to better hug the shelf. And there is no problem with topology clipping inside of itself. It happens in games all the time. The difference is how you use it to make your models look better, or how you like clean them up using it. So there you go. You got a nice little notch. But here we have a problem is this is only 1 notch and we need, what, 4 more? So it looks difficult. And actually I want to close this in. Yeah, let's take this and just S and then X, nope, Y. Y and then close it in. And it just brings that gap closer. And it doesn't affect like the width or the length of the board. It just closes that gap. But what I want to do now is I want to duplicate this. But I'm not just going to Shift D because that's going to do this. And that is not... Actually, that's exactly what I want. But it's not a clean and easy way to do this. And I'm going to show you a much cleaner and much easier way that would help the hell out of me if I thought about it more often. And that is an array function. Now, this is the first of a bunch of modifiers that can affect different stuff, but this is one that's very useful for generating repeating patterns like this. So if we go into array, it's going to set the origin of your array around your object's origin point. So it's set right there, but that's okay. We'll get to that. So actually, to do this properly, we're actually going to separate this object. So that's a good one. That's a good, another thing. There's a lot of times where you'll duplicate a bunch of stuff like this, and that, get back over there. There's a lot of times where you want to edit objects like this, where you've made a bunch of repeated parts, but you don't want to, apply one modifier to all of them. And a really simple solution is to make an object a separate object. So to do that, you can select what you've wanted, go to Mesh, Cleanup. No, where is Separate? Separate Selection by Material or by Loose Part. If I hit by Loose Part, every one of these boards would be separated and be its own object. And that is useful for certain things, but in this case, I just want to separate the one board I have selected. So now it's its own board. It's going to get a name that's a copy. It's going to say, so these are called the crossboards. This is crossboards number 1 because it's a copy of the crossboard. But that's okay. We can name it whatever we want. I'm just going to name it Notchboard. Always name your stuff. Always name your stuff. Because if you don't, it gets real fucking annoying. Okay, so we're going to add a modifier to this object. Now we can add it, and it's just this object that's getting it. That it's getting added to. And you can see, it's put it at the other side. But that is because this is set to 1. If we want it on the other side, we just set it to -1. And now, hey, it's over there. It's almost lined up, and the easy way to line it up better is to take this object, grab this in the Y, and move it. And now you see, now it's lining up evenly with each of the posts. I hope I spaced these evenly. I think I did, but we'll see. Because we need 5. Not that many. We need 5. Thank you. So you can see there's a slight variation in the distance. But if we want these posts evenly spaced, the best way to do it is to align the notches and their subsequent little segments with where we want them on this board. So it requires a little eyeball measuring again, but the distance here and the distance here should be relatively the same and all that. So I'm actually going to take this whole thing. Actually, I'll start with this. I'll move this one this way. So we have from the actual edge of this post, we have like half a block and then 1 block. And then from that side, half a block, there's another. It's basically just eyeball it. And I'm kind of satisfied with that, because that and that are, they're close. Maybe a little bit over. There. So now, I'm not going to mess with this. This is nice. This is where I want them. Now, I have my object in my array, which actually... So, applying modifiers. Once you have a shape you like, once you hit apply, it locks it in. You can't be in edit mode for it. But once you lock it in, now it's this. Now this is this. And you have to live with it. But there is one small caveat. These are not joined. So, when you're making an array and you need all of the stuff together, Control Z is undo. So hit undo until you can't undo anymore. So, you have this. You want to click merge, because now they are merged, but they're only merged by distance. So if they are not touching, it won't merge them. But the best way to check this is to grab a point and move it. No, never mind. Now hit your apply and then check. So it's grabbed all of them because that's what it did. But if we check now, you grab this, it's 1 point. So we're good to go. And honestly, you can get rid of these little extra panels because it's just extra faces. And if you need more, or if you need to fine-tune your game and focus on cleaning up topology and make sure it's all perfect, that is where you would have to look. Is all the little stuff like this adds up. So cleaning up so this is less faces helps. But I don't care, because that actually gives me a good segmented separation for these, and it lets me pattern these, so I'm happy with that. But now we gotta align our little posts. And once again, excuse me. There we go. So these are not all the same object. These are actually copies of this first object, so I'm just gonna get rid of these, and then go up to this. And here we are. And now I'm just going to align all the posts. G, Y. And you can see my origin is actually set to this one. But I'm going to set the origin. I'll show you how to set the origin to the center of all 5. Since they'll be my actual object that I'm using. G, Y. Center. And like I said, that clipping is okay. It's okay to have a little bit of clippage because real world objects press into each other or grind against each other. They don't just rest perfectly flat. And there we go. And now we know that these beams are spaced appropriately for each other. So there we go. Okay, so editing the origin. We want the origin in the middle of all 5 of those posts. So, tap N. It opens this side panel with a bunch of options and tools in it. So, if you go to Tool, effect tool. Your little box, your clicker, is your effect tool. And if you set it to affect only origins, then whenever you right click, no. Oh wait, duh. Jeezy. Whenever you grab, it's actually going to grab the origin of the object you have selected. So if I go to this object, its origin's right there. So if I grab it, it's not going to move the object. It's moving the origin. And then if I just slide it along the Y to the middle, get it as centered as I can. GY, get it right in the middle. And that's as centered as I can get it. And now we have a good origin point to use for the rest of this. So now tick that off, because otherwise you won't be able to do anything with any of the other stuff. We need these posts and this board duplicated for the other two shelves. So get it all selected, Shift D, and then Z, and it'll slide right down. And that's how you can make good copies of stuff. It's often a good idea, especially when you're working with games, if you want some more detail to these, to make a couple different variations, like adding notches and stuff to this to make it more detailed. But I'm saving myself a bunch of time because I'm a solo game dev and I don't have all the time in the world. But now there you go. So all the rest of this board, all the rest of the shelf was just made with basic scaling and moving of objects, duplicating of course. That's all the boards and beams. It's cylinders and cubes. This is the only complex piece we have. And that's all we had to do, was figure out our shape, duplicate it along the array, and there you have it. I think it looks a lot better now. Don't you?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first episode. The next one, I'm going to start texturing this, and the first one's just going to be color texture. Just going over how to make a color texture, how to make a procedural color texture, and to convert it to image textures for games. And we'll go over reflection data and roughness and all that, and normal maps, especially normal maps, on some of the later, more complicated assets that I have planned. But farewell, adventurers, and I hope that helps you get started with like a little bit of 3D modeling stuff, just the basics, because there's a lot you can do with just this.
Bye.
Farewell, adventure.